Hey everybody, I hope you enjoy this video. I have a cold right now, so my voice may be a little hoarse. But I hope you enjoy it anyways. I'll try my best to keep the coughs out of it. Number 1. The car. Sometimes paranoia is a really good thing. For example, I had a really bad experience a few years ago. I live in a house across the street from a really popular church. The street at the front of my house is perpendicular to the church, and there's a stop sign right in front of my house. So I see a lot of cars that stop right in front of my house and go to the church. However, I rarely see them late at night. I like to do things at night. And when I come home, usually around midnight or sometimes even later, I like to sit in the dark and watch some television or something. This night, I had my porch light on. I have a big picture window in my front room. Oh, I should also mention that when this happened, I had only lived in the house for about a month. I lived in the same town, but moved from an apartment to a house. Well, this one night, I was sitting in the living room after coming home from an ice cream shop. I got myself a huge banana split from Oberweis. I was sitting on a couch in front of my big picture window. I had the porch light on, but I was sitting in the dark in the house. Looking out the window, I saw a big SUV drive in front of the house, and it stopped at the stop sign. So the car was right in front of my house, and it sat there. I kept looking at it, sort of wondering why it was sitting there. It didn't really bother me though. I mean, he may have stopped to text someone or talk on his phone, which would have been the responsible thing to do. But he sat there for about 7 minutes. Then he turned and drove down the perpendicular road. Although I thought it was weird, I put it out of my mind. I went back to eating my banana split, which was melting nicely. There is something about melting ice cream which can be very yummy. About 2 minutes later, however, the car pulled back up to the stop sign. It must have gone all around the block and stopped there again. This time, just like the previous time, the driver sat at the stop sign for nearly 5 minutes again. This time, I was a bit more weirded out. I looked at the passenger seat of the car and noticed there was somebody sitting there. I couldn't make out much details about them, but I could see he was looking around. He also looked at my house, and when he did, he continued to look at my house for a period of time. Finally, like before, the car turned around the corner and drove around the block. I wish I could say that was the end of this, but it was hardly the end. The car did this about 7 times. After the 5th time, I began to feel really nervous. Technically, I didn't think the guy was breaking any law. I couldn't call the police, but it was beginning to make me very nervous. I didn't have a gun, but I did have a large sword in my bedroom. I went and grabbed it. I guess I really didn't think that anything dangerous was really gonna happen, but I felt safer with the sword. After the 7th time, I didn't see the car again. I felt really silly for having the sword in the room. I finished my mostly melted banana split and watched a little more television. And finally, I settled down to go to bed. I fell asleep quickly, but I also woke up pretty quick. And it was because my throat was really dry. I got up and walked through the dark, through the living room and into the kitchen. I never turned any lights on. When I walked back to the living room, I thought I heard a noise, like a scratching sound. I didn't think about it and I just went back to bed. I fell asleep nearly right away. I woke up again and wasn't sure why. I heard a noise. It was like a cracking sound. I jumped up quickly, grabbed the sword, and ran into the living room. A man was standing in my living room, and the front door had been busted open. He was wearing an orange prison suit. I was scared, even though I was holding the large sword. We stood there, both looking at each other. While we stood there, I noticed out the big window that the car pulled back to the stop sign. I felt fear rush through my body as I completely expected someone to come out and help the scary-looking man in my house. Several men rushed out of the SUV and came to the door. To my shock, though, they tackled the man who had broken into my house. I was told to put down the sword, and I had to back up with my hands up as I realized these were police. So what happened? The man escaped from the county jail. I hadn't heard about it because I had my phone off and didn't get the area alert. The car was full of cops trying to find him, which is why they had been around the block a few times. They had scared me, but they were just police officers. I hope my story was scary to you. It was to me, and I could understand that it might not be as scary as some others. But walking out of that door and seeing that escaped man break down my door, even holding the sword, I was consumed by pure terror. Number 2. Kidnapping Near Miss. This happened on my birthday when I was turning 15, so all the way back in 2004. Back then, me and my family were living in the Chicago area, and since we moved the next year, I might as well tell you that we were living in Hubbard Woods, Glencoe, or the Winnetka area. At the time, I was your pretty standard goth girl. I was pale, wore all black with fishnets, chains, spiked jewelry, the whole works, and even had my hair cut in the dyke spike fashion. I don't mean that to be offensive. I just never heard the hairstyle called anything else. I guess I just want to paint a picture of how I would typically come off to people. Despite this, I was commonly told that I was a pretty attractive girl. Well, if I would just change my style. I still wonder if this last part played into how things went down that night. Like a lot of other naive teenage girls with bad self-esteem, I dated anyone that showed interest in me. And back then, anyone was this kid, Matt. Probably the nicest thing I could possibly say about Matt was that he was a shitty boyfriend. He pretty regularly smacked me around, told me I was too fat, and made fun of things I liked. You know the kind of guy I'm talking about. He was an abusive prick. But 14 and soon to be 15-year-old me was in a pretty bad place emotionally. I was severely depressed and sinking into what turned out to be severe mental illness at the time. So I just put up with his crap because it was someone who was willing to give me the time of day. Trust me, I know how stupid this was and would go back and slap the shit out of myself if I could. I'm not making any excuses for myself. I know I was a terrible daughter and made shitty choices. But what's done is done, and we're getting off topic. So, for a few weeks leading up to this incident, Matt had convinced me to start sneaking out of my house at night to see him. We lived in neighboring villages, and his house was probably about a 30-minute walk from my house. Usually, he would meet me about halfway, and we would hang out at a park for a while, make out, share music on our iPods, and that sort of thing. A normal teenager shit. On this particular night, the night before my birthday, Matt said he wanted to be the first person to see me on my birthday, and convinced me to sneak out. It was all too easy getting out of my house, since every bedroom had a door that led out to the backyard. However, once out, I was always scared of getting caught by the cops in my village for curfew violation. Where I lived was extremely safe, with very little crime, so it was pretty common for kids to get picked up for minor violations simply because the cops were bored and had nothing better to do. To avoid getting caught, I would usually wear black sweats, a black hoodie, and black Converse so I could blend in easily with the shadows and make very little noise. This night was in early December. There was no snow on the ground or anything, but it was bitterly cold to the point that it stung a bit, and your nose and cheeks would turn red pretty quick. I had added black fingerless gloves and a black beanie to my sneaking out gear, and honestly, I probably looked extremely suspicious, but whatever. Also, this was in the pre-smartphone era, back in the days where Nokia phones ran supreme and Zoolander-sized flip phones were abundant. So, after leaving my house, I hid in the front yard and called Matt with my ridiculously tiny flip phone. It was probably around midnight, and I was annoyed that he sounded like I had woken him up. Hello? Matt yawned, clearly still at home in bed. Dude, are you even awake right now? Where am I meeting you? I asked him, obviously annoyed. Just start walking to my house, and I'll call you and let you know, alright? Bye. Matt snapped at me, hanging up the call. Irritated, but already ready to go and already outside, I started towards his house. Looking back, a lot of what I did was actually pretty comical in retrospect. If a car came down the road I was on, or a house light clicked on, I would quickly duck behind or into trees, bushes, or any landscaping available, which was plentiful in this area. Probably 15-20 minutes into my walk, I realized this asshole wasn't meeting me anywhere, and that I'd be walking all the way to his house, since he just couldn't be bothered. Great, I thought to myself, already knowing how crappy this night was gonna be. Once I finally made it to Matt's house, I noticed a tent in the yard. According to Matt, he was an aspiring mountaineer and rock climber, so this was kind of typical of him. In fact, he rarely shut up about the subject. I made my way over to the tent and let myself in. Matt was curled up, in the single sleeping bag in the tent, fast asleep. Annoyance bordering on rage, I kicked him. Not very hard or anything, but just to wake him up. We argued for a bit over me traveling the full distance to his house out of his laziness, but it became apparent to me why he wanted me to come over, and it definitely wasn't because it was my birthday. In fact, he didn't even mention the subject once. After my anger subsided a bit, we ended up fooling around a bit. Pretty much everything short of a home run, if you catch my meaning. As is typical of guys like him, he quickly started falling asleep directly afterwards. It was probably like almost 3 a.m. at this point, so I knew I'd have to leave soon. But I wanted to warm up a bit first. Converse are hellish shoes in the winter, for those of you who haven't experienced the cold of the north. He only had the one sleeping bag, and he was pretty direct about being unwilling to share it. So while he passed out, I kind of put my feet under his sleeping bag and rubbed my hands to warm up some. I was pretty scared to make the trip back alone for some reason. Maybe it was the distance, since he had never had me actually come over to his house before. I don't know. But I was nervous enough that I didn't leave until about 3:30 or 3:45 a.m. On the way back, everything was going pretty normally. I avoided being seen or heard for the most part, and aside from hating my boyfriend for being such a jerk and hating myself for being stupid enough to date such a jerk, everything was relatively fine. And that is, until I was about 6 or 8 blocks from my house. I was making my way down a street that intersected with another that was almost a straight shot to my house. When it happened, a lone white van came blasting down the road, taking me by surprise. It was very out of place for the area. It was one of those vans that has the windows painted over in the back, and was just an utter piece of shit. It looked like it was from the 80s or even earlier, and had rusted, peeling paint, although I didn't really see that clearly until a moment later. Mind you, I lived in an area where it was normal for people to upgrade their car every 1 to 2 years to stay in trend, and I am really not kidding about that. Even teenagers here almost never drove around beater-style cars. It slowed down to a crawl, seemingly once it had spotted me at about a block away. Hoping uselessly that they hadn't seen me, I dove into a bush. As they approached, a loud squealing noise alerted me that they were stopping right beside my hiding place. I was in the middle of a block, not near any intersections, and the car hadn't even pulled over to the side. They just stopped, dead, in the middle of the road. There was absolutely no reason for a car to stop beside me like that at nearly 4 a.m. I didn't really consciously think any of this. It just occurred to me in a split second, as a pounding surge of adrenaline tore through me. In that moment, I didn't stop to think. I didn't freeze. I didn't even turn to look at the van. Like a fucking flash, I burst out of the bush, down the driveway of the neighboring house, out of sight of the van, plastering myself to the side of that house behind the chimney stack that jutted out about 1.5 feet from the house. I was as silent and still as possible, and my heart beating so hard I could hear and feel it, and I listened. To my absolute and utter horror, I heard at least 3 doors slam, coupled with a small amount of quiet chatter comprised of male voices. I could still see the street facing to the back of the van, and as tears of complete terror began effortlessly streaming down my face, I saw the beams of 3 to 4 flashlights. My brain went into absolute overdrive. I didn't and still don't know what those people wanted from me, but I was determined that they weren't going to get it. Should I hop the fence in the backyard? Have they seen where I went? Should I stay here, or would I be able to move without being seen? I had no idea what to do. I could still hear the chatter at various distances, and hadn't heard the car doors again, so I knew they were still out there, searching for me. After what seemed like an hour, but was likely only about 30 seconds, I decided I had to get further into the backyard of this house. Silently, I sidled along the side of the house, and once I could see that none of them were in a line of sight from me, I silently sped into the backyard. I could not have picked a better house to hide behind. Whoever lived here had a tall deck leading to a glass sliding door, and along the bottom of the deck were thick, neatly groomed bushes. As quietly as possible, I slipped behind them and crouched down. If they came back here, I decided I would just have to burst through the sliding glass door for help. It wasn't a great plan, but I couldn't call 911 without alerting these guys, whoever they were, to my position, and I needed immediate help, not 10 minutes down the road, stay on the line help. So I crouched there, crying and praying I wouldn't be found. I swear, I almost had a heart attack when one of the flashlight beams flashed down the driveway of the house I was behind. But a few moments later, I heard a quiet but distinct, "Let's go," followed by car door slams and the sound of the van disappearing down the street. I think I stayed in that bush until almost 5 a.m., too scared to move, but still scared of getting caught out of the house. The adrenaline never left me, and I was hyper aware of any slight noise, a movement, vibration, anything. Eventually I knew that people were going to start getting up for the morning commute, and I had to get out of there before I was discovered by the homeowners or neighbors, oblivious to my plight. I cautiously made my way down the driveway and peered down the street. No cars, no people, no van, okay, I thought to myself, and I took off like a lightning bolt for home. I didn't try to be quiet. I didn't try to hide this time. I ran until the frigid air burned my lungs and I could taste blood, and everything but my path was a blur. I stuck as close to the houses as possible, even running through a few front yards. And finally, my house was directly in front of me. I blasted across the street, into the backyard, through my bedroom door, and collapsed on my bed, panting, exhausted, still terrified, adrenaline finally filtering out. I passed out into a dreamless sleep for a few hours before having to get up for school. I have had a lot of terrible birthdays, but this one was definitely the worst. Strangely, I am glad that it's my worst birthday, and in a bittersweet way, appreciate the experience. I never snuck out ever again after that, and never looked at strangers the same either. I wish I could say I dumped Matt over this, but that didn't happen until months later. I don't know what those men wanted from me, although I have a pretty good idea of it, and sadly, experienced predatory men both before and after this experience. What I can say, though, is I'm glad that this was the worst birthday instead of my last. Number 3. Apparition. I'm 20 now, but I was between 12 and 14 when this happened. I had recently moved to the Washington countryside from Los Angeles, and I was really depressed about it. I was born in LA and had lived there until I was almost 12, and even though I'd always dreamed of living in a rural area, I never wanted to leave behind everything I had ever known. In order to help you gain a better understanding of what my mind is like, I was diagnosed with both NLD and generalized anxiety disorder when I was 10. NLD is a disorder that is closely related to Asperger's and is technically on the autism spectrum. This causes me to have a very hard time adjusting to any sort of change, no matter how big or small it may be. So this move was the biggest change I had ever experienced, and my mind was full of unpleasant and painful thoughts. When you couple this with the fact that the trailer we were forced to move into was old and rather creepy, you can be sure that I was not doing well. Now on to the actual event. I'm certain that a lot of my feelings were due to constantly being anxious and upset, but even if this particular incident wasn't paranormal, there were other instances in that trailer that undoubtedly didn't have a natural cause. I might talk about those later if anyone is interested. Anyway, one night I was in bed, feeling pretty okay in spite of everything. I had to go to the bathroom, so I got up to head through the kitchen and dining room, which were located in the same place, and down the short yet particularly dark hallway. This hallway was definitely the main source of any jitters we had, but I was getting used to it. I made it to the bathroom, which was between my parents' room and my little brother's room, and did my business. As I opened the door and stepped out, I was positive that I saw my dad standing there, waiting to go in after I was finished. I smiled and said, "Oh, hi, Dad," in the nicest way I can. But he just stands there, not saying a word. The smile left my face, and a feeling of dread washed over me as I started to realize that maybe this man isn't my father. Indeed, the figure intimidated me more and more the longer I looked at it, and I bolted around, getting back to my room as fast as I could. I immediately closed the door and climbed back in bed, trying to reassure myself that everything's fine. But the feeling of dread doesn't go away. Instead, it grows at a rather fast pace as I imagine the figure coming down the hallway and entering my room. Finally, I reach the point where I can't hold back my fear any longer, and I run back down the hallway in a panic, wanting nothing more than to be with my parents. I enter the bedroom, blubbering that I saw someone in the hallway. My mom tried to comfort me as my dad got out of bed, pulls out one of his guns, and made a thorough search of the entire trailer. He checked every nook and cranny of the place, including my bedroom. He returned a little while later and gave the all clear. I feel a little better after that, and they all told me that I probably mistook the reflections from their television to be a figure. Whatever it was, I'm glad it ended well. I will never forget how genuinely scared it made me, though. Number 4. Running. I love walking. I do it for exercise, or when I'm anxious and stressed out, I run. One night, after an argument with my oldest son last summer, I decided I needed to run to let off some steam. It was around 10:30 p.m. Now, I live in a mountain area, streets surrounded with lots of woods. There are a lot of houses in my town, a movie theater, not big. And I run past them, and I'm usually comfortable doing so. That is, until the end of my run, which stretches into the little town next to mine. The long stretch of main road runs right into the next town, and past a park with a volleyball court, a tennis court, and skater park. It's nice during the day, but at night it's completely dark and empty. It's settled into the woods, next to public housing. As I was running towards this area, I heard a car coming from behind. Nothing to worry about until it slowed down, and the person driving it was looking at me. I couldn't tell if it was male or female and didn't really want to find out. It started rolling again. Well, good, I thought. A minute went by. I saw the same car coming back towards me. It lined up with me, and I saw it, the light blue car again, and again. It slowed down to a crawl and was looking at me. A bit more concerned now, I strained my eyes to see who it was. Too dark. I stopped running but kept walking. I was now just passing the tennis courts, which, by the way, were pitch black. I was very aware suddenly how all alone I was on this stretch of road with a park on one side and woods on the other. Barely any streetlights lighted the way, and it started going uphill. I was breathing a bit heavy now, and worried how I saw the same car passing me twice, at 10:45 at night. It was at that moment I heard a car coming, yet again. It was the light blue car. This time it drove by slowly, without slowing down, and the second it passed me I said to myself, I'm out of here, and quickly turned to head back from the way I came. Right behind me, from the black tennis court area, was a man, a very big man, wearing dark sweatpants and a dark hoodie over his head in the middle of summer. I freaked out and took off, running to the top of the hill. There was a supermarket up there, and felt like I made it in no time flat. The store was closing in 5 minutes, but I begged them to let me stay and explain what had happened. Me and 2 other employees hunkered down by one of the large front windows, and after a few moments the blue car pulled into a spot sideways. The hooded man came into view. All our eyes were bulging watching this, and he got into the car, and they drove off. I got away lucky, but some don't. I don't run at night anymore, no matter how stressed I am. Number 5. Trip to Moscow. I went to Moscow, Russia, back in December of 2016, and stayed for almost 2 months to meet and get to know my now fiancée, Ksenia. Yes, we met on a dating site 3 months after my 16-year-old daughter hung herself, but that's another story for another time. We talked for about a year before we met in person. I was very careful not to fall for a scam or anything like that. I know some of you will say, a year? Wow, really? Yes, a year. And I had a few things, personal things, to clear up on my end, and I felt if I was going to spend the money to go, I better make a real trip out of it. I went back in October in 2017. We first stayed one night in the worst hotel I have ever been in my life. Best way to put it is red light district, or something you'd see in Skid Row. It had mold growing around the shower and around the bathroom sink. Also, the only window in the room was allowing the rain to come in around the seals. It was a real dump. And the only reason we stayed there was because my flight came in so late, and trying to find a last-minute hotel would have been a bitch. Just so you know, I did get a full refund for the remaining nights we had booked, which was 20 nights. Thank God we didn't have to stay there. Anything was better than this. The next morning we got up and found another hotel on the west side of town, even though we were further away from the center of Moscow. I wanted to take the metro system, and she wanted to call a cab, but I wanted to get as far away from the place as possible. So here I am, with a huge camouflage suitcase, a laptop bag, and a backpack. The suitcase had no wheels, only a large shoulder strap. I will admit I'm strong and in shape, but carrying everything did get heavy after a while. At the metro, I had to go through a security checkpoint, and not speaking very good Russian made it all that much more difficult. That security agent laughed at me a couple times, and so did my fiancée. Overall, wasn't worth it. Should have called a cab. We got to the new hotel, and we got room 205. Big improvement from the last place, or so I thought. I should give you a description of the room so you can understand the layout. When you first walk in, you're standing in a hallway. Take a few steps in, and off to the right is the bathroom. If you walk straight ahead, that's the bedroom. Straight across from the bathroom, through the hallway, is a huge living room. Each room had a door. It was a really nice setup. We unloaded all of our things, and I put my laptop on the desk in the living room, and we cleaned up from that dirty hotel we had just left. Then we went out for the day. Upon our return from going out for the day, we noticed a few things had been moved. My laptop bag was on the floor, which I would have never done. I laid it on the center of the desk in the living room. I quickly went through it to make sure nothing was missing and everything was there as it should be. My fiancée called me into the bedroom, and my big bag was open, and a few things were strung out on the floor. We went down to the front desk to complain, and they said no one had been in our room other than us. My fiancée, being as clever as she is, asked to see CCTV footage of the second floor hallway. They allowed it. We went over to the security desk, and we reviewed it with them. A camera clearly had full vision of not only the hallway, but our door was in plain sight. We saw no one other than her and me walk in. About 1 hour later we walked out. 9 hours later we returned. No one in between, other than a few people passing by. We both apologized to the on-duty hotel manager and to the security officer, and we went back to the room. We sat down and opened up Netflix on my laptop, and we started watching a movie. And we cuddled, and I got up and opened the refrigerator and got the champagne out that we had gotten on our way back. I poured us each a glass. Not even a minute later, we heard 3 knocks on the door. I looked at Ksenia, and she looked at me. I asked her jokingly, expecting anyone? She said no. I got up, opened the door, and no one was there. I looked down the hallway and saw no one, and to get the area of the elevator, they would have to move very fast. I thought maybe a neighbor was doing something in the next room. I went back and sat down and began to cuddle and kiss. Then we heard the knocking again. This time, I knew it had to be the door. So I got up, walked to the door, and no one was there. I asked Ksenia to come over to me, and she did. I asked in a whisper, "Am I going nuts, or did you hear the knocking?" She said, "Yes, I heard it. Why?" I said, "Maybe it's nothing," and we sat back down and continued watching our movie. After the movie, I packed up my laptop back in the bag and placed it back on the desk, and we went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to Ksenia shaking me and calling my name. "Joe, wake up, Joe." I woke up and looked at her and asked, "What is it?" "Your laptop, Joe, it's on the floor." I got up, ran into the living room, and sure enough, it was on the floor. I looked at Ksenia and laughed and said, "Now you're just trying to scare me." But I could tell by the look in her eyes, she was just as scared as I was, or should I say, just as confused. I picked up the laptop bag and placed it back on the desk. I looked out the window and saw that we had gotten a few inches of snow, and since we were on the second floor above an awning, I looked to see if someone had been walking on the awning, and saw no footprints in the snow. I checked the windows, and all the windows were locked from the inside. We quickly showered and went downstairs and had breakfast, and went to the front desk again. I asked about the rooms next to our room. The lady said the room off to the left of the living room was a conference room and it was locked. The room off to the right was empty for the next couple of nights. Ksenia and I just stared at each other. "How about the room above us?" The lady had a puzzled look and said, "Empty. Why?" Ksenia took over the conversation in Russian since, like I mentioned before, I'm not fluent. Ksenia explained to her what was going on, and she pulled us into her office. The manager did her best to explain in English that a few years ago, someone had died in our room. She didn't say how the person died or in which part of the room the person died in, but that was enough for me to say, "Nope, we want a different room, as far away from that room as possible." They said, "We can have a room ready tomorrow for you." Ksenia and I agreed to that. We went out for the day, and on the way back we stopped off at a store and I got a 12-pack of beer. I thought, if I have to deal with this, I want to make sure I sleep through the night. We got back to the hotel, and I was expecting my laptop bag to be on the floor. Well, it wasn't. My big suitcase was fine. Nothing of mine was moved or touched. However, Ksenia's things were strung out all over the place. I helped her organize them back in the small bag that she had brought with her. We took a shower and watched another movie and cuddled. About 20 minutes into the movie, we heard footsteps in the hallway between the bedroom and the bathroom. I jumped in time to see the bathroom door slam shut. Ksenia let out an ear-piercing scream. I ran over to the bathroom and flung the door open and saw nothing. Ksenia ran up behind me and said, "We need to leave. We can catch a train to my place and come back tomorrow and get our things." She lived 2 hours away from Moscow by taking the metro and a train. As late as it was, we wouldn't be able to get on a train that wouldn't have gang members or a bunch of drunks. I just wasn't in the mood to travel, to be honest. We drank a few beers while we packed everything up. When we went to bed, I shut and locked the bedroom door. I woke up in the middle of the night to sounds of soft whispering and loud footsteps in the hallway between the bedroom and bathroom. I felt to my side, and Ksenia grabbed my hand. She put my hand on her face and I could feel her tears. It made me so fucking pissed that I didn't agree to leave when she wanted to. I jumped up out of bed and threw open the bedroom door and said, "Whatever you are, leave, and leave right fucking now. You're not welcome here anymore." I said it in English and in Russian, or at least I said what I knew in Russian. Either way, it wasn't pleasant. I shut the door, lay down next to my fiancé and listened. We heard nothing. Dead silent. I didn't know how to take it, to be honest, but we didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, we switched rooms, and the rest of the trip went great. The Wendigo and the Werewolf. A few weeks ago, me and my friends went camping for my best friend's birthday. We were all sitting down and talking when my friend, we will call her Amber, got up and said that she had to go pee. I said that I'll go with her and make sure that she doesn't get lost. She let me go with her, and I stood near some bushes while she walked to go and find a place to pee. And then all of a sudden, the crunching of the leaves stopped. I didn't hear anything. It was like I had gone deaf. I looked over to see if she was okay, and she wasn't even there. Me and my friends had to look for her, but it was like she was never there. This is where Amber's point of view comes in. So as I'm walking, I blink, and I'm in a place that I have never seen before. She says, "I can't believe where I am." And then I hear this voice that sounds like a guy with a bubble in his throat, and it is saying, "You will be okay. All you have to do is eat." Over and over again. So I'm freaking out and looking around for something, anything to eat. "And that is when you found me," she said, pointing to me. This is where her point of view ends. It had been 3 days until we found her, and when we were walking back from the campsite, we heard this howl that, for lack of a better word, sounded like a howl from American Werewolf in London. All of us stopped and looked at each other. Then we saw this thing that almost looked like a German Shepherd, just really big, like 3 feet tall, and then it started growling at us and drooling. Then it stood up, and it was about 6 feet tall. It looked at us, and it had reflective eyes. It was really close to us, and its breath smelled like mold. At that point, we were all booking it to the car. When we finally got inside, We all started talking at once. Once we calmed down, we talked about what we saw. Needless to say, we are never going camping again. Number 7. My True Story. This happened to me in 2010. I was 19 at the time. I was in the first year of my relationship with my still now boyfriend. We had been jumping from place to place. Neither of us had jobs or money at that time. We were moving in with my mom and her then boyfriend out in the country. From what I knew, this guy was in his 50s and he actually grew up in that house, so this house was pretty old. Now, at this time, my mom was heavily on drugs, so she was always out doing what tweaked out people do. Sorry, and no offense to anyone. So it was sometime in November. I don't remember the exact date, but we packed up and had someone drop our stuff off. When we arrived, no one was home, so we unloaded everything, set everything up in the middle of the living room. I looked around a bit. The house was small and old. The kitchen had an old stove, like a stove from the 50s. It looked pretty cool, actually. So the house was set up a bit weird. I couldn't tell you where the front door was. There was a back door in the kitchen, and I guess the front door was on the side of the house, almost in the middle of the living room and dining area. There weren't any hallways, so in the living room you could just see 2 doors, each leading to 2 different rooms. In the kitchen there was another door, which was the master bedroom, I guess, and connected to the master was a Jack and Jill bathroom. So the only way to get to the bathroom was through one of the rooms. Anyways, after looking around, we both laid on our bed and fell asleep. I don't remember how long I was asleep, but I woke up. I remember just looking at the ceiling for a while. Then I thought I heard my mother's voice. It sounded so clearly in the house, and for the life of me, I cannot remember what the voice said. I just remember it sounded like it was coming from the kitchen. So I got up and looked at the kitchen, and waited for my mom to come through the doorway, but nothing. Now remember, this was out in the country. There wasn't a house near for about 2 miles. I got up and walked in the kitchen, looked outside thinking maybe she was still outside, but no one was there. I woke my boyfriend up and told him what I heard. He didn't say much, so we just went about our day. This was just the first of many experiences we had in that house. Another time, it was again just me and my boyfriend at the house. We were just laying there in the silence. This was before smartphones, and out there we had no cable TV. It was nighttime, and we started hearing someone having a conversation outside, but it sounded like it was coming from around the whole house, so we couldn't pinpoint it. It was dark outside, there was no light, so even looking outside the window, all we saw was pitch black. So my boyfriend went outside to check, and there was no one out there. But the voices continued. We couldn't hear exactly what they were saying. We just sat and waited for them to go away. It wasn't scary or creepy, just weird. The last experience was, again, me and my boyfriend were in the room by ourselves. We had a huge TV, the old school ones, the big bulky ones on top of a TV stand. It was dark outside. There was no light, so even looking outside the window, all we saw was pitch black. So my boyfriend went outside to check, and there was no one out there, but the voices continued. We couldn't hear exactly what they were saying. We just sat and waited for them to go away. It wasn't scary or creepy, just weird. The last experience we had was again me and my boyfriend. We were in the room by ourselves. We had a huge TV, the old school ones, the big bulky ones, on top of a TV stand. On top of the TV I had a perfume bottle, which was up there for a while, a few days I believe. We were sitting on the bed talking, when the perfume flies off the TV to the floor. This wasn't a fall like it just fell off. It had a good distance and some force. I'm the first person to try to debunk things and explain them away, but the way it flew off, I knew it didn't just fall off. Anyway, those were my experiences there. I have to say the voices that night that came from all around the house was the weirdest experience. I never felt scared there, though. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. I want to thank all the subscribers who submitted these stories for their patience waiting for me to get them narrated. Most of my stories don't come from subscribers, as I usually find them on the internet. But I appreciate when subscribers send me stories, and I encourage you to send in a story if you have one. If I haven't gotten to your story, you can send me a mean reminder too. Again, a big thank you to everyone who has submitted a story to me. If you have time, please check out the Killer Orange Cat subreddit in the link provided. You can also take a look around at the Killer Orange Cat merchandise store. My sister added some mugs and some Valentine's Day merchandise, and there is a link to them in the description. And in the meantime, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the subscribe button below, or using the icon of Ichigo that will appear at the end of this closing. Feel free to leave me a comment to let me know what you think of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter using the links in the description. If you have a story you like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address provided in the description. My main requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not yet been read on any other YouTube channel. And whatever you do, please don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.